Hi, my name is Ankur Gupta. I'm the General Manager and Vice President of the Test and Product Division within Siemens DISW. I'm extremely excited by our continuously evolving first-class product portfolio. This evolution enables our customers to bring smart products of the future to market faster. The semiconductor industry currently faces three major challenges: process scaling, design scaling, and system scaling. The Tessent organization leads the industry by providing world-class design for test, silicon bring-up, yield learning solutions, and in-life monitoring for silicon lifecycle management. Tessent is addressing the modern-day challenges of SoC test on three different axes. First, process scaling. Our defect-oriented test solutions bring new and advanced fault models to address the growing quality requirements for the very latest process nodes. Coupled with our diagnostics and yield management tools, we enable extremely high yield ramp by finding significant systematic yield issues. Then design scaling with the introduction and rapid adoption of our packet-based test solution Streaming Scan Network, SSN for short. This is a once-in-a-decade technology shift. Customers are able to address the complexity of reticle-sized designs with multiple repeated cores and optimize packetized test content delivery to these cores through an SoC-wide uniform test bus. SSN is also the foundation of our latest product addressing the DFT challenges for multi-die devices in 2.5D and 3D packages. Finally, system scaling. By extending our existing in-system test capabilities by adding on-chip functional monitoring through embedded analytics technology, Tessent provides extensive in-life support to ensure that test, safety, and security requirements are met for the full life cycle of the device. At Siemens EDA, we are dedicated to delivering industry's leading test innovations to you to help you engineer a smarter future faster.
Hi, welcome to the International Test Conference. First time in 3 years. It's amazing to see everyone. We actually are hybrid, so there's a virtual audience as well. So welcome to the virtual audience. Slide. Okay, I'm Teresa McLaurin, the General Chair this year. And it's been an interesting journey in creating ITC this year, hybrid for the first time. But I think we've got a really great program. First, I want to really thank our corporate sponsors. We couldn't do this without you, and it's really nice to have you. I also want to thank our IT sponsors, IEEE, IEEE Philadelphia section, and of course, Computer Society. But I can't get away from without thanking the steering committee. The steering committee works all year long to put this whole conference together. And they're really good at their jobs, which makes my job a lot easier. So thank you, steering committee. So the test week. We had 12 tutorials, which happened on Sunday and Monday. I hope you were able to make some of them. We are going to have 3 keynotes and 1 visionary talk. 32 technical sessions comprised of papers, industrial practices, and special sessions. We have 4 panels, one of which was last night. 35 posters, which will be on the exhibit floor on Wednesday. And I want to let you know that not all of the exhibit authors were able to make it. So you will see a QR code where their poster is, and you can use that to actually chat with the author during the poster session. There's 19 exhibitors, so go visit them. There's a corporate forum for our corporate supporters, and that also takes place on the exhibit floor. And they'll have lots of interesting presentations going on there. And there's 2 workshops, the Automotive Reliability Test and Safety Workshop, as well as a Silicon Lifecycle Management Workshop. And those start after ITC ends on Thursday, so they start Thursday afternoon and they go Friday. So you can still sign up for those workshops if you want to. Now, Underline, who is doing our virtual part of the program, also has an online where you can watch the videos virtually, but also you can access the program. And their site works really well on the phone too, so you can get access to the entire program, look at the sessions, put them on your calendar. You can search for a paper author, find out where they are, and you can view the posters. All the posters have a 5-minute video that you can watch. And you can do all that on your phone or on your computer if you want. And there's also instructions for this on the website, the ITC website. Now, if you see, there's 3 horizontal lines up in the upper left corner. And if you click on that, you will get this menu. And the reception, there's also an announcements in the receptions, and that's where you can see any announcements that are going on within ITC. Also, there is the link to the proceedings there. And just to note that underneath the proceedings is the username and password you need to use. It's real small, so I just want to make sure you didn't miss it. You can also get to the sessions here. You can, the schedule's a calendar. There is the expos where all of the corporate supporters and exhibitors are listed, as well as links that they have. There is that the posters are all there, and there's also a help desk. So if you have any issues with the site, you can use the help desk. And that little purple character at the very bottom, that is to customize your experience. So you can make the letters larger, make them different colors, whatever you want to do. Okay, as I mentioned, this is a hybrid conference with the 32 sessions. Now, most of our presenters will be here live, but because we are an international conference, we wanted to make sure that we made this conference available to everyone all over the world. And we didn't know what the circumstances were going to be. And it turns out that it was difficult for other countries to come to ITC. So there will be some virtual presentations, but mainly physical presentations. Same with the posters. You'll have some physical and a few virtual. The corporate forums, they're going to be on the exhibit floor. We have some live presentations, which is the plenary and the keynotes, the visionary talks and special sessions. They'll all be recorded, and everyone will have access. Everyone with a full conference registration will have access to these recordings for a month after the conference is over. The one thing that will not be recorded are the panels. So if you want to see those, you have to go to those live. And this is just a quick schedule check. We're in the plenary, and after the plenary, there will be our first keynote. Then we'll have a coffee break, and the Diamond supporter will have their presentation, who is Siemens this year. After that is lunch on the exhibit floor, and there also will be a corporate forum going on at the same time. And then our sessions start. And then tonight is the ITC Welcome Reception. And then tomorrow we have a keynote, and right after the keynote, a visionary session, visionary talk. And actually Wednesday, there's a corporate forum during the coffee break, but not today. And you can see there's another corporate forum after lunch or around lunch. And I want to mention that session 2, session 5, and session 7 each have a panel as one of their sessions. So if you want to make those live, that's where those are. Okay, the floor plan. We are here. And right next to us is a session room. So one of the session rooms is on this floor. And over here is the exhibit hall to the other side of us. And then on the upper floor, we have 4 more session rooms. And in addition, there is a B ticket room. So if you are a presenter at ITC, make sure that you go to the B ticket room and upload your presentation, your PowerPoint. Otherwise, you're only going to have a PDF available. So do that as soon as possible. There'll be someone there to help you. Okay, the exhibit floor. So over here we have a networking area, and it's actually nice. It's full of tables, which is very nice. And over here is where the corporate forum will happen. And in here is where all the posters will be, and also the lunch will be available. And of course, in the very front, there's all of our wonderful exhibitors, so make sure you go visit them. So speaking of exhibitors, these are all of the exhibitors on the floor. I'm sure they can answer many questions you have. Also, we have a passport program this year. So you have to have a valid ITC full registration. You should have 3 passports in your bag, 1 for each day. And in order to be eligible for a prize, you have to get the destination stamp, which is the front side of the passport, and that's Siemens this year. And you have to fill out the back side with 6 other stamps from other exhibitors down on the floor. The drawings at the end of each day, there's going to be 2 winners. The first prize or first drawing will be an iPad. The second prize will be a $100 gift certificate. So join in. And so you don't have to be on the floor to get the prize. To hear the prize, it'll also be announced on the ITC website. However, you must pick up your prize while you're here. We are not shipping them. Okay. All right, and for more information, you can go to the ITC website. All right, we do not have yellow cards this year. We've gone forward in life. But what we do have is a rating system. So in the underline site, you will see that there's a paper, but there's also an area where you can click on for the abstract. And in that area, you can give that paper a rating after you see it. So 1 to 5 stars. So please fill this out, especially if you like a paper. We do use this information to help us figure out best paper for the next year, for this year. Okay. All right, biggest thing of all to me, get social. Right? It's been a long time. We haven't seen each other for a long time, or go to meet new people. Last night we had the post-panel session social, so I hope that you were able to make that. Tonight we have the ITC Welcome Reception, and I'm just going to show you a quick map. So we're up on the upper left in the convention center, and the ITC reception is we're on the lower right in the adventure lawn. So come and join us tonight at the reception. Also, there's coffee breaks. Make sure that you like I said, this is a great time to get social. Also in the exhibit hall, just walking around the exhibit hall, you'll see people you haven't seen in a long time, meet new people. And there is a lunch also available in the exhibit hall, another time to get social. And of course, we also have links to social media pages, so Facebook, Twitter, etc. Post what's going on here. Okay, and ITC is more than just a conference. It is international, and we do have a community. So we also have ITC Asia, and we have ITC India. And if you weren't able to make those, it just so happens we have sessions, a couple of sessions in ITC with the best papers from those conferences. So you can make it. Just to let you know, the IEEE International, the ITC India Conference, it takes place in July of next year, and the call for papers has been announced, and they're due in February. And it takes place in Bangalore. And then the ITC Asia, which takes place in Taipei, Taiwan, it has a paper submission deadline in April, and it takes place in September of next year. All right, so now I'd like to introduce our technical program chair this year, Konjang Lee. KJ?
Okay. Yeah, good morning, everyone here. And I should say that good afternoon for people in Europe. Yeah, because this is a hybrid one, and we have people join us from Europe now. And also, I should say good evening for people in Asia. Actually, in Taiwan, in Japan, it's midnight at this moment. Yeah, So anyway, and I'm Kun Jong Lee, program chair for this year ITC. Okay, so first of all, I would like to thank all the program committee members. They have helped me to organize the program this year from solicit papers, review papers, and select papers, and also many of them serve as section chairs, and many of them help me to organize the programs. So I would like to thank you all, and I really appreciate that. Okay. So for the technical program, Teresa has given overview for this year's program. So like we have tutorial Sunday, Monday, and a workshop Thursday, Friday, and also we have 3 keynote. One today, one tomorrow, and one on Thursday. And also we have some panels. So let me just go through this. We have 22 technical sections. Those are paper sections. And this year we accept 45 regular paper. So that is lower than 30% accepting rate. And we also have some short paper and some industry practice paper. And in addition to that, we have 10 special sessions. And these special sessions are mainly invited talk. Yeah. So this special session, they are all for very hot area now. So like the silicon life cycle management. And we also have a special session on computing and memory design qualifications. That's a part of the silicon life cycle management, SLM. Okay, we also have a special section on chiplet integrations. And this one thing quite special for this year. That's the hardware security certifications. We have been talking about hardware security for several years, and now I think it's time for us to talk about the industry standard for hardware security certifications. Okay, and we also have a special session on high power electronics. The high power electronics here related to some compound semiconductor, which in ITC we seldom talk about that. But those are very important because they are widely used in something like car electronics. Okay? So we also have special section on that. And also we have special section on quantum circuit testing, emphasize on testing. Yeah, so that's I think quantum electronics is the future of the electronic industry. Right? Okay, and also we have special section on in memory of 3 test strands, and we also have special section on ITC India. Okay. And a special session on TTTC PhD competitions. Okay, and in addition to that, actually this year we also have some special tracks. And these special tracks actually, for each special session is 90 minutes, the 1.5 hours. And for special tracks, each special track consists of 3 to 4 sections. So some of special sections here actually embedded in the special tracks. Okay, so we have special tracks on silicon life cycle management, memory security, machine learning and AI, accelerator, and automotives. Okay. And also we have 4 panels talking about chiplet integration, silent error, RAS, that's RAS in critical mission systems, automotive safety and security. And also we have certified posters that will be tomorrow lunchtime. Okay. Okay, so that's the program we have this year. And here, there's some announcement. So the proceedings link is accessible in the underline announcement area. So you can, through this link, you can access to all the all material in proceedings. And the ITC presentation material will be released online after the session has been completed. So we actually, we record all the paper sections, and we will put that online after the presentation is done. Okay. And Teresa just mentioned the last thing here, because when we ask people to upload their paper material, we ask you to upload the PDF file. But in order to play your presentation, we need the PowerPoint file. So please be sure to go to the B-Ticket room and to upload your PowerPoint file. Okay? So that's what I want to say. Yeah, so back to you, okay. Teresa. Okay.
Thanks, KJ. So next, we're going to do the Best Paper Award. Now, what was fascinating to me about the Best Paper Award is that we are truly an international conference. And so there were a lot of papers that were really good last year. And we did due diligence. We looked at the reviews of the papers. We looked at the yellow cards. We also had people from the program committee that were inside the sessions that gave back feedback. And it was really hard to decide which one was the best paper, but we did make a decision. But we also felt that there were two other papers that deserved an honorable mention, so we've also have those. And these papers, they really are from all around the world, from different countries. And the really interesting thing is all three of these papers, they are a cooperation between academia and industry. And I think that's when we're really strong, when we're innovating, when we do that type of thing. So that's the first one. So the first honorable mention is for improving volume diagnosis and debug with test failure clustering and reorganization by Mu-Ting Wu, Cheng Chang Ku, James Chen Mo Lee from National Taiwan University, and Krishnai and Gaurav Bhargava from Qualcomm. So is anybody from the, yeah. There you go.
That's it. That's all the author. Maybe once again.
Okay.
Yeah, this way.
Okay, our next honorable mention is a fast and low-cost embedded test solution for CMOS image sensors by Julia Lefebvre, Philippe Debeau, Patrick Girard, and Arnaud Viracel. And they're from France, from LIRM and ST Microelectronics. Unfortunately, because they are from France, none of them could make it this year. But anyway, I'd like to congratulate them for doing such a great paper. And now, Best paper. The best paper for last year goes to Prasant Viswanathan Pillai, Ruben Parekhi from Texas Instruments, Bharadwaj Amruta from the Indian Institute of Science, and is for exploiting application tolerance for functional safety. So once again, from India, they couldn't make it, but so I just want to thank them for their contribution to ITC. So before I bring Yervant up, I'd like to bring Lisi Wong up for a minute.
Thank you, Teresa. So I'm not Yervant Zorian, but you already know that, right? There's only one Yervant Zorian who everybody knows. So I'm here to introduce this year's Lifetime Contribution Medal. And this award is the highest recognitions of TTTC. In fact, it is the highest award from IEEE in our community. So it recognizes outstanding technical contribution over a lifetime, making fundamental impact on test technology. And it was usually presented in the flagship conference like ITC, and will feature an article in Design and Test magazine. So the open nomination usually is in the summer, and this award has been there for 25 years. And you can see a lot of well-known people who build the foundations of test technology and this community. So this year, with a strong endorsement from the ITC and unanimous support from TTTC, it's my honor to announce this year's recipients and Yervant Zorian. So Yervant received a master's degree from USC, a PhD degree from McGill in Canada, and an MBA from the Wharton School of Business, University of Pennsylvania. And he's a distinguished member of technical staff at AT&T Bell Labs. So, and that was a long time ago, right? It's in the 90s. And I have a little story to share with you. I remember that was the first time I met Yervant, and the person that introduced me to Yervant was Tom Williams. And you know what Tom said to me? And Tom said, Lee, this is the most important person you need to know, and you must know. And at that time, you can see 1995, VTS, I remember it was VTS in 1995, and Yervant was already a well-recognized leader in our community. So he's old. And then after that, he's chief technologist of Large Visions and VP and chief scientist of Veras Logic. And then before he moved to Synopsys, became the fellow and the chief architect since 2010. And he pioneered many, many works we're familiar with today, including the building self-test in the early stage and repair, and the embedded cores, board IP and SoC testings, testing multi-chip module and SIP 3D-IC chiplets, and more recently on automotive safety, reliability, and security. And this list will go on, and because we only have one slide, we cannot fit everything, Yervant did. And he received many honors. He holds 45 patents, over 450 paper publications, and 5 books. He's a fellow of IEEE in class of 1999. He received the IEEE Industrial Pioneer Award and the IEEE Kaufman Award. He was IEEE TTTC past chair and is currently the TTTC president. He's the editor-in-chief, has been editor-in-chief in Design and Test magazine of computers. And he's a founder and chair of IEEE 1500 Standard Working Group. He was a general chair of the 50 ITC, that was in 2019, Washington, D.C. If you remember, that was before we switched to virtual. That's the last physical conference of ITC. He was the general chair and happened to be also the 50 ITC. He was also the 50 of Design Automation Conference in 2014, the general chair. He's co-founder of many symposiums and workshops, including 3DIC, DATES, Online Test Symposium, the ETS European Test Symposium, Latin American Test Symposium, and TECI, IIP, TRP, Design for Manufacturing and Yield, and more recently, right, the art automotive workshops, and the last 2 years, the Silicon Life Cycle, and again, the list is going on and on. I don't even recognize some of them. It's too many of them. Anyways, so in conclusions, Yervant is a true innovator, is a true leader, is a pioneer in test technology, and he has made lasting impact on our test community. Let's welcome Yervant Zorian. You want to say something?
Yeah. Okay. This was humbling. Thank you so much, Lee, for the introduction. It's an honor. It's an honor to receive this Lifetime Achievement Award, even though I'm still in the middle of my lifetime, and there's a lot more to do. But it has been a privilege to work in this domain, in test technology. I'm sure many of you feel the same. It's a moving field that we have been part of. We have seen how it grew from test to all the adjacent areas that we all invested in, and it will still grow. So technically, it is very fulfilling to be in this field. But more fulfilling for me is to work with our community, to work with numerous colleagues around the world, to collaborate in my research with not only people who I work with in the companies, but also many academic partners who I published with, worked with in the past, and I continue to do so. And all the conferences that allowed me to work with so many colleagues around the world. So it's a real privilege to work with that second family of mine, the test community. So with that, I'd like to thank you for being collaborators, friends, and I look forward to work more with you. Thank you. Okay, there's a little bit more on our TTTC related awards for today, after the one that Lee kindly brought up. This one is on Bob Madge Innovation Award. You know Bob Madge, one of our colleagues who passed away a few years ago. Since 2015, we established this new award. This new award is for particular innovation. It's not for a person, but for a solution that has been contributed in the test or the yield domain and yield domain, and made it available to the community at large. So it's not particularly for a company. There's a small team of people who participate in the selection process, and we have done this since 2015, as I mentioned. It's based on nominations, so you have the privilege or the chance to submit names if you want in the future. This year, the recipient of this award is a colleague that is known to many of you, Mark. Mark Tehranipur has been in our field for again, quite a long time. He has done hardware security. He has innovated so much in hardware security domain. In terms of services, he helped establish Host, Payne, Asian Host, the Journal of HAS, all in hardware security domain. He has received many awards, such as the Golden Core Award from IEEE Computer Society, and he's a fellow of IEEE and a fellow of ACM. He founded multiple centers, research centers that is, in different universities. And he has done research in a number of topics, published extensively, has multiple books, has numerous patents, and he has done lots of invited and keynote talks in different locations. Currently, he is in University of Florida. He holds the endowment chair professor position of Intel Charles Young Preeminence, and also he is the chairman of the Department of Electrical and Computer Engineering. With that, I'd like to invite Mark to the podium to receive his special award. In other years, Marianne Madge, the spouse of Bob Madge, would have come and handed the award to the recipient. Today, she is not with us physically here, but she is virtually watching us. Marianne, if you're there, you can say a word if you want.
Congratulations, Mark. Bob would be so pleased you're receiving this award. Thanks to ITC, and congratulations, Mark.
Thank you very much. Mark,
yes. Hello, everybody. Well, thank you very much, Yervant, and thank you very much, Marianne. This is quite an honor to receive this award. Bob, actually, I knew Bob very early on as a young researcher in the field, and he always, for us, was more of a, an innovator and a visionary, and we looked up to him. And I'm quite humbled, actually, to have my name associated with him and his legacy. So thank you very much, Marianne, for keeping his legacy alive and for your continuous support. I wish you were here. But I also want to thank Phil Nye and the committee for nominating and selecting me to receive this award. It would not have been possible without the support of family, as well as many of my friends and colleagues who happen to be in this room. So thank you very much. Because I have this stage, I hope you don't mind, I actually give my 2 cents on a couple of items. One is about Yervant. And I think Lisi mentioned this. Yes, he is the most important individual in the test community, but what he doesn't know is that some of us who actually got into the community was because of him. 1997, when I started working in test, it was his papers, especially in design and test, that I would read. And believe it or not, I would take his words like holy words, and I would just read them over and over and over again. The second thing is that I really owe him this idea of harbor security. Not many of you know that I started very early on to work on harbor security, but the community was sparse. We didn't have a home. And as a young 3-year, I would say old professor, I always look up to him, and I reached out to him and I said, Yervant, this is what I'm going to do. I wanted to put together a workshop or a symposium on this topic. And his answer was, what can I do to help? And I think that really got me. And actually, that was in ITC, the ITC of 2007. And I never acknowledging it enough, never thanked him enough for doing that, because host community actually owes him, because TTTC was the first sponsor behind host. So for that, thank you very much. My second thing, I have to say this. I'm from Iran, and many of you are following the news in Iran, and it's heartbreaking. I know we're not politicians, we're a bunch of scholars, but we have our own platform. I want to ask every one of you, if you know what's happening in Iran and what's happening to women in Iran, because they're being forced to put cover, and Iranian women are extremely resilient. I bow down to what they do every day, and they're in the street. And as of today, more than 50 of them have been killed because all they're asking is that, can I have a choice what to wear? So I'm asking you and begging you to use your platform and stand up for an important cause like this. So Iranian women need you. Thank you very much.
Okay, we're moving ahead. Well, now that the award is handed, the next step is to mention that we have an annual Service Award for students that you have all seen in the past. Every year, one student who serves the test community through nice volunteer activities receives this award. And this award is a package from ITC and TTTC together, supporting sponsorship, attendance, travel, and so on. And this year's recipient is Juicy. Juicy Yara is with us today from Polytechnic Auditorium. You may stand up if you want. I'd like to acknowledge her and wish her that, and congratulate her for receiving this award for this year. Thank you, Juicy. Please continue the good work that you already did for the tutorials program as well as for the European Test Symposium so far. We look forward to see you more often. Moving ahead, we heard the name of Tom. We can hear about two more giants who have left us this year. Throughout this 1 year, we lost three very important individuals to our community: Wojtek Mali, Tom Williams, and Dheeraj Pradhan. They have been on this stage many times. They have presented so many papers, books, received awards, and so on. And we have strong memories about them, I'm sure many of you. Now, while we remember them because they're not with us anymore, we remember also their work, their papers, their technical contributions, as well as their friendship. Okay? So anyone like them, a giant who leaves us, we don't forget them. We remember them because of their long-lasting contributions. With this, I'd like to set my respects again for all the work, and please keep looking for the good results of them and many other giants that we had. By the way, this afternoon, we do have a particular session dedicated to the three of them. I'm sure many of you would be interested and you'll have the chance to talk, but their mentees or their past students or colleagues will be talking about them. It's a 2 o'clock session this afternoon if you're interested, about Tom Williams, Wojtek Mali, and Dheeraj Pradhan. One last award worth mentioning here is the Doctoral Dissertation Award. This is the best doctoral dissertation which goes to multiple steps, as you know. It's called after Professor McCluskey, named after Professor McCluskey. It goes in 2 steps. We have the semifinals and the finals. Semifinals this year happened at ETS, VTS, and ATS. And now we have the finals. Again, later this afternoon, we have the final session where the judges and the PhD students will be there to do the final selection. This year is the 45th anniversary of TTTC. I just wanted to bring up the fact that we are growing as a community. We have over 16,000 test professionals around the world, and they are very active in many places in the world. You know, our community expanded a lot. When we started, we were based in the US mostly, and now we have lots of geographies that we cover, lots of generations that we cover, and many adjacent topics that we cover. So if you're not part of TTTC, if you're not a member, you don't receive the emails, the updates, the newsletters, please do so in order to be part of the family. Thank you so much. With that, I'll pass it back to Teresa.
There's one other award, sorry. For the last 3 years, we haven't given these awards. So these awards actually cover the last 3 years, and it's for years of service for the program committee. And so if you're on this list and you're here, you can pick up your award Wednesday at the reception desk. And also for the steering committee awards as well across the years. So thank you all, because of course we couldn't have ITC without you. Okay. So now I want to announce that next year, Lisi Wong is going to be general chair, and ITC will be in October from the 8th to the 13th. And it will be here again, the happiest place on earth. And so, so I hope you can make it again next year. Jeff Furrick will be our program chair, and the abstract deadline is April 14th, and the paper PDF deadline is April 21st. So please consider contributing to Next ITC. Now what you've all been waiting for. So our keynote speaker today is Parthasarathy Ranganathan. And Partha is currently a VP and Technical Fellow at Google, where he's the Area Technical Lead for Hardware and Data Centers, designing systems at scale. Prior to this, he was an HP Fellow and Chief Technologist at Hewlett-Packard Labs, where he led their research on systems and data centers. And Partha has worked on several interdisciplinary systems projects with broad impact on both academia and industry, including widely used innovations in energy-aware user interfaces, heterogeneous multi-cores, power-efficient servers, accelerators, and disaggregated and data-centric data centers. He's published extensively, including being the co-author on the popular textbook, Data Center as a Computer. He's a co-inventor on more than 100 patents and has been recognized with numerous awards. He has been named Top 15 Enterprise Technology Rockstar by Business Insider, one of the top 35 young innovators in the world of MIT Tech Review, and is a recipient of the ACM SIGARC Maurice Wilkes Award, Rice University Outstanding Young Engineering Alumni Award, and the IIT Madras Distinguished Alumni Award. He's also a fellow at the IEEE and ACM and is currently on the board of directors for Open Compute. His talk is going to be Make Computing Count, Some Grand Opportunities for Testing. Please help me welcome Partha.
Hi, everyone. It's a pleasure to be here. So hopefully we'll get the slides here. I'm guessing everyone can hear me okay. So while I bring up the slides, how many people are attending ITC for the first time? Okay, there's a bunch of us here, so thank you. This is my first ITC. I've read a lot of ITC papers and I've listened to a lot of keynotes, and I've never been here before. So thank you for inviting me here. It's exciting to be here. And thank you for everyone that's here in person as well. So my talk today is called Make Computing Count, Some Grand Opportunities for Testing. And what I thought I'd do today is to really structure the talk in two parts. So the first part, I titled it Testing Times and Testing Opportunities. And what I want to do is to talk about how we are at a pivotal moment in systems architecture. I'll talk a little bit about the slowing of Moore's law and what it means for us. And I'll talk about how, as a community, we are all responding in terms of thinking about new accelerators, new software-defined infrastructure, and so on. And I'll talk a little bit about some of the problems as it pertains to the testing community as well. And then in the second part, with that as context, I want to talk a little bit about what does it mean for the testing community and what are some of the grand challenges ahead. And I want to focus on 4 specific vignettes of some really interesting challenges that I think we all together can work on. Okay, so with that, Teresa, when she introduced me, she mentioned, and I'm really privileged to be part of the team that designs the planet scale computing that underpins all of Google services, Google Cloud, Gmail, web search, and so on. And as part of doing that, we've had to face a whole bunch of challenges in terms of thinking about how do we deliver performance at scale? How do we deliver reliability at scale? How do we deliver cost efficiency at scale? And I think we've done a fairly good job in the past 2 decades or so. But recently, we are seeing several significant challenges. And the first one, I think, something that I'm not going to belabor to this community, it's the slowing of Moore's law. And again, Moore's law means a lot of things to different people, but in this particular talk, I'm going to refer to Moore's law as the slowing of improvements in performance per dollar, performance per cost. So we are all used to performance doubling every 2 years for the same cost, and that is slowing down. And it's not just in terms of basic computing technology. Every single aspect of our technology, whether it's DRAM, dollar per byte, or hard drives, or power efficiency, or cost efficiency, we see some significant technology plateaus in all aspects of technology. And that by itself is a problem. But then when we combine it with the demand that we see, So this picture basically shows two graphs. You have time on the x-axis and you have an exponential on the y-axis. And the line in blue shows the increase in computing. And the line in red shows, in this case, a proxy for the demand that you have. What I have here is the number of hours of video uploaded per minute. And you can see that the growth in the red curve is exponentially diverging from the growth in the blue curve. And so what that suggests is that demand is significantly outpacing supply in terms of all the traditional workloads that we can think about. But then if you look at another example, what I have here again is time on the x-axis, exponential on the y-axis. And in this case, we have a picture that shows the demand for machine learning cycles from OpenAI. And what you can see here is a phenomenal 300,000-fold increase in the compute we want. And more importantly, if you look at the requirements, performance doubles every 3.5 months. And so leave alone the Moore's law of performance needing to double every 2 years. Here we have a workload that shows performance requirements doubling every 3.5 months. And as an example, if you look at Google Palm, so how many people have seen or heard about the Google Palm here? A few people. This is, we had a blog post recently, and this is one of the latest models that we have. It has about 500 billion parameters. And more importantly, it has 2.5 yottaflops of computing that generated that. And the Google Palm model is very interesting because it can do a whole bunch of really sophisticated things, some of which is almost magical. But I picked one example of how the model can actually interpret jokes. And if it's, the font isn't too bright there, the context here is, the joke is, did you see that Google just hired an eloquent whale for their TPU team? It showed them how to communicate between two pods. And the machine learning model basically says, well, yeah, TPUs are a type of computer chip, and a pod is a group of whale, but a pod is also a group of TPUs, and the joke is that the whale is able to communicate between blah, 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 right? And if you think about the fact that a machine learning model can actually have the sophistication to start explaining jokes at this level, that's pretty phenomenal. But then if you think about the applications of machine learning, which are starting to become pervasive, whether it's healthcare, where you're using machine learning for diabetic retinopathy, cancer detection, robotics, self-driving cars, weather detection, agriculture, neuroscience, we are at a very fundamental epoch in terms of where we are with machine learning. And sometimes I often think that we are almost at a new epoch in science. And if you think about how science has evolved over the centuries, we started with pure empirical research, which was all physics by observation. We've gone on to theoretical, which is all mathematical and equations. We went to computational, where we had computational modeling. And we are now at this new epoch of science where we combine big data, machine learning, custom silicon, and we are really trying to understand phenomena through a combination of all of the above approaches, so which is super exciting. So some significant opportunities ahead that need us to need more and more computing. And then on top of that, if you think about some of the recent trends around cloud computing and the smart Internet of Things and so on, that is another fundamental pivot in terms of what we're thinking about. Every single business in the enterprise is thinking about digital transformation when they move to cloud. And that, again, is an incredibly nascent and huge market that, again, poses a lot of requirements for computing. So this problem is basically what we are trying to look at. So on one hand, we have slowing supply from Moore's law slowing down. On the other hand, we have exploding demand with all the requirements that we talked about. And the combination together is really the problem statement that we as a community have to be facing. Now, but there is more. So I will posit to you that there is almost something that I call a negative Moore's law. So how many people here have heard of some of the security challenges like Spectre, Meltdown? A lot of people here. And so these are side channel attacks that came up in the past couple of years. And the interesting part about this is not that they're very scary, which they are, but the fixes to many of these security challenges needed us to turn back some of the performance optimizations that we have. So not only do we have performance improvements slowing down, we actually have regressions in performance, and hence this term negative Moore's law. And so that's a challenge. In addition, let's think about reliability and testing, something that is very close to this particular community. Google recently wrote a paper called Cores That Don't Count. And in that paper, we talked about this very insidious problem of silent data corruptions. And silent data corruptions are basically, we've always known there are some things where there are a few errors. It's 1 in a million, 1 in 10 million, and they're rare, and we know kind of how to deal with those. But in the last 5 years, we're seeing that these errors are increasingly becoming more and more prevalent. We are seeing orders of magnitude higher frequency in how we see these silent data corruptions. Now, there's a whole bunch of reasons for why this could be possible. We are trying to still root cause these things. I was talking to Jeff earlier, and he pointed out these are symptoms, and silent data corruptions are symptoms, and we still need to figure out what's going on. But part of the challenge, again, is as Moore's law becomes slower, the fabrication technology gets ever complex, the architectural complexity gets ever complex, and the marginal defects with such large CPU designs, the diversity in voltage, temperature, workloads that we need to stress test our systems on gets very complicated. The lifetime degradation effects, especially when you start having systems in the fleet longer. Again, one of the consequences of end of Moore's law is if you're not getting performance improvements, there is no incentive to upgrade your systems, and you're going to have your systems longer in the fleet, which means some of the wear out effects start getting more pronounced. And finally, I think one of the most significant changes is when you think about systems like Google, hyperscalers, or cloud scale computing, you have the opportunity to put like 1 billion cores in a single room and really stress test things that you normally wouldn't be able to do. And so the combination of all of this leads to some pretty significant test and screening misses. And so that's bad. So when 1 + 1 does not add up to 2, it's always a problem. But then if you start thinking about some of the secondary challenges with silent data corruption, things get really, really hairy. So the first one is the software toil. So whenever there is a silent data corruption, the amount of time it takes for people to figure out there's a bug has an incredible tax on our software developers. And one of the things I like to point out, whether it's a Google, when I was talking to KJ, he mentioned, hey, Google, I thought Google was a software company, and there's a lot of hardware going on right now. But hardware engineers still are a minority compared to software engineers. And it's a factor of 1:100, 1:1000. And even across the community, if you look at the number of software engineers in the world versus the number of hardware engineers in the world, the ratio is pretty significant. And so as designers, we have an obligation, we have a leveraged play here in terms of being able to reduce the toil for our software colleagues in terms of being able to do that. And sometimes SDC, silent data corruption, is a pretty significant challenge there. The second problem we have is around cascading failures. So if you have one silent data corruption in a virtual machine in a cloud, and that virtual machine migrates to multiple systems, you have a problem. If you have one silent data corruption in a key that encrypts something, and you corrupt an entire file, you have a problem. And so we've seen many of these problems in the fleet, in production, cause phenomenal trouble. And so it's very important to figure that out. And then finally, what we see, the orders of magnitude increase that I talked about, to me just represents the tip of the iceberg. For every error I see, I worry about how many errors am I not seeing. And my suspicion is there is a significant fraction of errors that we are not seeing as well. So the problem is bigger than we think. And so the combination of all of this leads to some fundamental trust issues in terms of, can we trust our computers to do the right thing? And that's, again, a very, very significant problem to face. So again, slowing supply on one hand, growing phenomenal demand on the other hand, and in combination with new challenges around testing and security, we have a problem. And then the way we are going to solve this problem is to really start rethinking how we think about Moore's law and start thinking outside the box. And so really there are two big pillars in terms of how we think about this new Moore's law at Google. And the first one is to think about how can we efficiently design hardware. And this is around thinking about accelerators and thinking about the velocity of how we design hardware. And the second one is around how do we efficiently use the hardware that we have. And this is around thinking about software-defined infrastructure, disaggregated systems, and so on. And a common theme across both of these pillars is the increasing use of machine learning to squeeze out more benefits, and the use of cloud to be able to democratize some of these advances. So let's talk about the first one, which is how do we build efficient hardware. So the notion behind building custom silicon is fairly straightforward. It's, as most of us here know, if we can take a specific workload and optimize our system for that workload, you get improved performance for the same die area, same power. So you get improved performance per area, performance per watt, and potentially performance per dollar as well. And so over the past few years, we've gone from CPUs to GPUs to how many people have heard of tensor processing units? Okay, everyone, I'm very happy. How many people have heard about video coding units that Google has talked about as well? A few people there. So video coding is, we have a video coding accelerator that makes YouTube faster, that makes Google Meet faster as well. Again, phenomenal improvements in performance per watt. We have accelerators for security. We have accelerators for networking. And so we have essentially an alphabet soup of new accelerators that are coming in. And every one of these accelerators is pretty fascinating, but for purposes of this talk, I want to step back and highlight two major vignettes that I think is relevant for this community. So the first one is this notion that when you're starting to think about this new world of accelerators, it's fundamentally about thinking about software, it's about thinking about systems, and it's thinking about co-design. So the picture basically that you see on the screen shows the hardware as this tiny sliver at the bottom, and then on the top you have the firmware, the software, the drivers, the compilers, the libraries, the tools, the debugging. And so it's not just about building a single tensor processing unit chip. It is about expanding them to build these large-scale distributed systems, the pods that you heard about in the Palm joke. It's about thinking about issues like scaling, virtualization, quality of service. It's about thinking about how do you co-design accelerators with very big code bases. Google web search code is huge, and it's been optimized significantly. It's been optimized in an era that was pre-accelerators. No single hotspot, lots of complicated threading. How do you take care of all of these? How do you do testing at scale? And one of the important things, the lessons that we have learned when we have deployed all of these accelerators at Google is that it's as important to think about the usage of the accelerator in the fleet as it is to think about just designing it. And I often kind of paraphrase the famous philosophy quote: if a tree falls in the forest and nobody heard it fall, did it really fall? And the equivalent of that is if an accelerator lands in the fleet and nobody can use it, did it really land? And so it's really important to think about the tooling, the debugging, the testing that happens with every one of these accelerators as well. So the broad theme really is that you want to think systems, you want to think hardware, software, co-design. And the second big observation really here is that we like to think about big accelerators like tensor processing units or video coding units. But we're going to see a continuum of accelerators across small accelerators, big accelerators, and so on. And the picture on the left in the screen here shows the cycle spent at Google. And what was really interesting in this picture is that 1 out of 3 cycles at Google are basically spent on 4 or 5 big workloads. We call them the data center tax. These are things like memory allocation, memory copy, protocol buffer, RPC. So the kind of things that are the basic for you to kind of think about large-scale distributed systems. And the fact that these are by far the largest workloads that we have at Google is pretty significant. And so designing accelerators for these data center taxes is very different than designing a tensor processing unit. And you need to be thinking about closely coupled accelerators and so on. So we're going to see a lot more accelerators that look very different from what we have as well. So the second part really is around thinking about how do you use the hardware efficiently. And really the key premise here is that you want to think about the entire data center as a computer and think about software-defined infrastructure. And one of the big challenges here is to take an existing system, a server that has been designed, and you disaggregate it. So you break it up into its individual components, and you basically think about compute complexes, memory complexes, storage complexes, power complexes. And what you have from this kind of an architectural approach is that you get efficiency by simplicity. So you have these simple modular building blocks that you kind of build together, and you get capability from composability. So you can combine all of these blocks together and be able to have some pretty significant differentiated solution as well. So it's a pretty fundamentally different way of thinking about hardware, which is wrapping this layer of software around hardware and calling it software-defined hardware. And then when you combine it with some of the changes in large-scale distributed systems. So once again, I don't have time to kind of go through all the epochs here, but if you look at distributed systems, we've kind of gone all the way from the internet era to kind of the client-server era to the I/O scaling era, to more recently the scale-out era. And we are again at the beginning of a fifth era of distributed systems where if I look at the workloads at Google, we are fundamentally rethinking what scale-out means, what distributed systems mean. How do you optimize for microsecond latencies? How do you optimize for accelerators? How do you optimize for persistent memory in the fleet and so on? So pretty significant changes there as well. And then finally, one of the key things that we are starting to use is to think about machine learning in all of these systems as well. And as one example, the picture on the right here shows the stall cycles associated with memory. And one of the interesting observations that we found when we looked at this picture is across Google, for every unit of money I spend, if I spend $1 on computing, I lose about 50 cents because I'm waiting stalled for the memory subsystem, either the cache hierarchy or the memory hierarchy, which at the scale at which we spend money, that's not a good effective use of money. And so we asked the question, can we do autocomplete for memory address patterns? So if you go to Google or your favorite search engine and you kind of type TES, it's automatically going to say, hey, are you thinking about testing? And so similarly, we applied a machine learning algorithm where if you are accessing memory pattern A, B, C, then you prefetch D, E, and F into the first level cache so that you don't have to wait even a single cycle and things are ready when you need them. And what was very interesting is that we found that out of the box, a very simple LSTM machine learning model could get twice as good as the best hardware predictor that we had at that time. And what was also very interesting is that the machine learning model, as you can see from the picture on the right, you could kind of identify archetypes. You could identify clusters of different access patterns that can then be used to be very prescriptive to the software developer about what they could do to optimize their programming patterns and memory access patterns as well. So very, very powerful way of applying machine learning to start thinking about efficiency in a different way. And then finally, the cloud is, again, a pretty interesting way to think about how we are thinking about systems design. And the combination of having a large data set where we can think about insights driven from large data analysis and logs combined with open ecosystems really gives you a chance to push the innovations for this new Moore's Law further. And so if you are a very small business, in the past, where if you had to kind of think about co-design and the kind of investment that you needed, versus in the future, where you could just go to cloud and buy the latest TPU and start innovating on top of that, the friction for innovation in this new Moore's Law is dramatically reduced with cloud. And I think that's interesting as well. So the broad theme that I want to take away from this particular part of the talk really is that Moore's Law is slowing down. It's leading to a completely different era of how we think about systems with accelerators and software-defined infrastructure. And there are really two common themes with all the stuff that I talked about. One is we are rewriting the rules of hardware and software. And second, we are thinking about this harmonious design between hardware and software, co-design, software-driven, software-based, software-influenced. And so those are the two key themes that really, I think, are pertinent as we start thinking about what does it mean for testing going forward as well. So with that, let me pause for a second and transition to the next part, which is, given this context, what does it mean for the testing community? So I want to start off with, like, there is a lot of phenomenal work from the testing community. I was looking through the program and some really exciting papers here. So thank you for all the work that you do. I think every single paper that I see here is very relevant to the challenges that we face. But I think there is a lot more. And so I'm not going to spend time talking about the future-looking work that I see in the papers today already. So I'm not going to talk about chiplets or stacked memory or all the challenges with kind of emerging stuff. They are very important. But I wanted to maybe highlight 4 vignettes where I think it's not business as usual. And then I think there are some new challenges. And Yervant mentioned this at the beginning, where when he was accepting his lifetime award, he said, hey, probably there's a lifetime worth of work still left to be done. And then I think these 4 pivots, I think, will hopefully give your community a lot more exciting opportunities ahead. So the first one, again, is talking about silent data corruption. I talked about how we need to plan for increased failure rates, increased longevity with the slowing of Moore's law. But then what does that mean? And I think what it means is, if I look at the challenges we are facing at Google with silent data errors, discoverability, how do I notice that something is problematic? Repeatability and reproducibility. We spend an inordinate amount of time once we know there is a problem, getting it to come back again. Sometimes it takes a long time, sometimes it takes the right set of circumstances, and then narrowing it down into a reproducible test set that we can then pass to our suppliers for them to be able to debug it and root cause it. Incredible amount of challenges. So how do you root cause it? I think this is a problem where we still don't have very good visibility. How do you localize the problem? And then once you have all of the problems, how do you service it? How do you kind of figure out something is wrong and isolate those machines and send them back to the thread? How do you kind of think about resilience? And individually, every one of these is a problem, but how do you do all of this at scale? When you have like 1 million servers that you're kind of thinking about, and these are handling some of the world's most business critical services. You don't want your Gmail to go down, or you don't want your cloud customer who's running a hospital to have any problems there. A pretty significant set of challenges. And one of the new set of problems that we've had to face and solve with silent data corruption is this notion of how do you do in situ stuff. In situ testing, for example, how do you root cause failures in production, in fleet, when you're running live production workloads? How do you think about features to monitor in the field aging, in the field wear out? How do you proactively prevent reliability excursions? And once again, you want to do all this at scale, but you also want to do all this at scale with dramatically lower overheads as well. And then finally, as I mentioned, I think we have a grand challenge ahead where we really want to get a couple of orders of magnitude at least in terms of taking what we have in terms of our DPPMs and improving that. And I honestly cannot see how we will do that unless we look at the entire life cycle, all the way from design, validation, manufacturing, deployment, early life, midlife production to retirement and wear out. And once again, some pretty significant challenges to be faced here as well. So the second observation I want to make is, I know the testing community focuses a lot on testing for correctness, and I think that's fantastic. I think one of the interesting observations here is with the slowing of Moore's law, you have an opportunity to think about testing for innovation velocity. What do I mean by that? So Moore's law, to me, is 3 variables. Performance doubles every 2 years for the same cost. So you have performance, time, and cost. And if you find that it is increasingly difficult to improve performance or improve cost, then time is a variable that we can look at. And so what you see on the picture on the right is basically various exponentials. And you have green, which is performance doubles 40% every year or so on. And then you have the red, which is slow down Moore's law. And what that picture shows is that if you cannot get 40% every 2 years, maybe you can get 15% every 6 months. And so this notion that you think about the area under the curve, you look at performance per cost per time, and you optimize the velocity of release. My colleagues in software often joke to me that they have really big software code bases where they release things every 6 weeks, every week. And when they come to me for designing hardware, usually I tell them, well, we have a really interesting idea, come back in 2 years when I'll be ready to deploy it. And that's not acceptable, right? And so the notion of how do we think about hardware design akin to software releases, how do we do co-design, modeling, testing, debugging, and do that at scale and be able to compress the timeline, I think is a pretty big challenge. And one of the things I think that is going to be very interesting is another trend that we are seeing in hardware, which is the notion of open source hardware. And Google has been really good about benefiting from and contributing to the open source community. So whether it is something like Kubernetes or Chrome or Android, we've had a very good track record. And one of the interesting observations that we are noticing is that we have an opportunity to do something similar for hardware as well. So the CHIPS Alliance is something that Google helped found with some other partners in industry and academia. And we've been able to put a lot of verification testing suites in there that has dramatically helped build an open innovation community around testing. Similarly, working with Intel, Intel has this open data center diagnostics, and we help with some of the silent data corruptions as well. And then Open Compute, I'm a board member on the foundation's board of directors, and there's some really nice opportunities there. And in a couple of weeks, we're going to be making some pretty significant announcements at the Open Compute Summit, where we are going to talk about the importance of an open innovation ecosystem for the testing community and how it can help with innovation velocity and be able to kind of attack Moore's law from this third dimension. And then the third vignette I wanted to offer, which is something that I think the testing community doesn't think about as much. And maybe if there is one thing you take back from this whole talk, I would say this is this slide, which is this notion that testing needs to evolve from being very narrowly focused to simple hardware level modules to start taking a more holistic approach, to start thinking about software as a partner in how you do testing as well. And so it is software defined, software driven testing, and so on. And so this notion of taking a full system view and thinking about hardware software co-design for testing, I think is going to be by far some of the biggest opportunities that we'll see. As an example, we've been playing around with this notion of what does software-defined resilience look like? So when you have silent data corruption or any other kind of testing things that we cannot catch, or if we find that some of the approaches to deal with faults comes at an inordinately high cost, can we have a knob that allows us to dynamically turn how much testing do we do? Can we have a knob, for example, when I have in situ fleet scrubbing for faults, or I'm testing something and I'm co-locating this testing with the other workloads in the fleet? Can I have a knob that adapts to what we want to look at as well? Can I do dynamic SLOs, service level optimizations? Can I think about knobs in the hardware that are used in software to kind of control how things are going on and so forth? And so this notion that there is a full stack and there is an appropriate breakdown across various levels of the stack that leads to much better optimas than just focusing on individual levels, I think is a very powerful idea that has a lot of benefits. And I hope more of us look at that as well. And then finally, it wouldn't be a Google talk if I didn't mention machine learning a few times. So I think machine learning, as I mentioned, does have some really interesting opportunities for testing as well. The picture that you see there, we've had a lot of recent success with using machine learning for VLSI workloads, whether it is architecture exploration, RTL synthesis, verification, placement and routing. We see evidence that using ML-driven approaches can have an order of magnitude disruptive change there. And so the notion is, how do we think about machine learning more pervasively? Auto discovery, auto dev testing. Google has this open source contribution called SillyFuzz, where we take RTL and we kind of come up with some really nice testing, and that's been pretty phenomenal. How do we do auto stress testing? How do we do auto adaptive testing? But I think obviously machine learning is not a panacea. And at the same time, when we start thinking about more and more adoption of machine learning, it's also important to start thinking about appropriate research on how to do it correctly as well. How do we kind of think about multiple tiers of checks and balances for safety, for fairness, for usability, for understandability? So there's a whole bunch of opportunities around using machine learning, but also using machine learning appropriately and correctly as well. So I think I highlighted these 4 opportunities because to me, as I was reading the program, it looked like these would be a different perspective that coming from outside the community, I could add to the conversation here a little bit. But honestly, I think there are dramatically a lot more opportunities. I think this is just the tip of the iceberg. And I think about this from mud to cloud, all the way from the data center to the software, from chip to ship, from design to launching the ship. If you think about the data center of the future, it's going to be fundamentally different. For the past 50 years, how we thought about designing data centers is not going to be relevant. We're going to be designing data centers completely differently. If you think about the server of the future, It's going to be dramatically different. It's already, if you look at an existing server, what used to be a single motherboard with a socket and with multiple DIMMs, it's now broken up. So you have multiple compute complexes. You have smart NICs, you have modularity, you have disaggregation, you have accelerators. We call this the multi-brain server of the future. And so the server of the future is going to be dramatically different. The silicon of the future is going to be dramatically different as well. And you see that already going on. And as you think about more and more people embracing COT technology and starting to innovate using ML for VLSI, it's going to be very, very different. And then if you look at the systems of the future, the distributed systems of the future, the software stacks of the future, they're going to be pretty fundamentally different as well. Any one of these changes would be a black swan event. A black swan event is a financial term where you're looking at a fairly deceptive term that in hindsight you should have predicted. And every one of these is a pretty significant deceptive event, but a combination of these, I think, is some pretty phenomenal opportunities for us. But again, every single one of these, I think to truly leverage the benefit of these opportunities needs co-design and collaboration across communities, across industry and academia, as you heard about earlier, across hardware and software, as I was talking about, across different groups in the community as well. And so I want to leave us with that parting thought, which is basically, as you think about the future of computing, point number one, we are at an pivotal epoch here. We are at an inflection point here. Moore's law is slowing down, and with that comes some pretty big challenges, whether it's things like silent data corruptions and increased test misses, or new opportunities, whether it is accelerators or software-defined infrastructure. The testing community is going to be a critical part of this journey going forward. We will have a whole bunch of new opportunities and challenges. We will have the traditional opportunities that all of us have been working on, but I think we're going to have some new opportunities, whether it is thinking about silent data corruption and testing at scale, whether it's also thinking about testing as an important tool in our arsenal to improve velocity to attack Moore's law, or whether it is thinking about testing in a fundamentally different way as software-defined, software-driven testing approaches, and using machine learning to optimize testing. And once again, I think co-design and holistic design will be key. So with that, thank you once again for the opportunity. And I think if you have time, I'm happy to take a few questions as well.
Yes, if anybody has a question, I believe there's a microphone out there. Find the microphone, ask the question. And also for our virtual audience, if you want to ask a question, you can type it into chat.
Yeah. Why don't you shout out your question and I'll try to repeat it.
Thanks for the nice talk. I'm Mehdi Tahori from KIT Germany. You mentioned about some of the topics like silent data corruptions, aging, and so on. And it is interesting that actually our community has been looking in these issues for a long time. I remember like it was around 20 years ago that the issue of software and silent data corruption caught the attention of the chip making companies. And, you know, it came from there. And there were lots of solutions from the community, industry, and academia for that. If you're talking about aging wear out, it was around 10 years ago that basically this community, ITC, used to have several work that basically looking into that. I was wondering how the issues are fundamentally different from, let's say, cloud computing and the way that you see it from, let's say, the solutions for software and silent data corruptions at the microprocessor level.
Good question. So I think the question really is, hey, we've had a lot of really good work here. What are the fundamental changes that need us to revisit stuff? I think it's a good question. So I have myself worked on silent data corruption or false decades back, and some of those techniques are applicable. I think the challenge to me really is twofold. One is we are seeing some of the root causes don't seem to be the same root causes that we have seen in the past, and we don't understand them. And it has to do with the fact that technology is much smaller, and we are doing some really magical things in technology and architecture design that we really didn't anticipate 20 years back. So the set of assumptions that drive faults have changed. Now, there are a lot of assumptions that are valid, so I think we can learn a lot going back to some of those papers. But I think some of the assumptions have changed. So that's number one. And number two, I find that in any community, you have a good academic body of work that is almost ahead of its time. And then industry catches up and says, hey, I see this problem. And then you see a resurgence where you take all of those solutions and you then make them applicable to deploying in production, in scale, in the fleet. And I think we haven't seen that work. And so, for example, I've written papers, which are award-winning papers on how do you take fault tolerance. And when I try to apply them in the context of Google at scale across millions of servers, they don't work. And so I've had to rethink and revisit some of those. And so I think to me, the second part is really key, is how do you do, say, and I mentioned this with in-situ testing, how do you kind of do in-situ testing across a billion cores? So I think that's the second problem. So the first one is some of the assumptions are different, and second is the deployment and the real world challenges are dramatically different. Thanks.
Thank you for the, there we go. Thank you for the great talk. I'm Ira Leventhal from Advantest. And I had a question. It was very interesting how you talked about software taking over for some of the things that hardware has typically done. And I think about, we also have cases with hardware taking over for software, historical things like computation and memory and so on. How far do you see this going? Can you see a world where we even stop using the terms hardware and software at some point in the future and it kind of just all meshes together?
I think, I don't believe we will have like one amorphous entity that is neither software nor hardware. But I do think the dialogue between software and hardware will get richer and more fine-grained. And so when you start thinking about defining the problem statement, I do feel that we will have to think about what does the full stack look like and what are the interfaces and abstractions and architectural aspects across hardware and software. And I think that is basically where things will change. I expect you will continue to have hardware and software because they have very different communities, very different trade-offs, very different cadences, time constants, and so on. But I think the notion of figuring out where are the boundaries and where does the handoff take and what is the give and take, I think there's going to be some richer conversations there.
Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you.
Any other questions? All right, well, let's thank our speaker.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Thank you. All right. So you're going to bring the slide up? So I'll just say that the floor is now open, and it'll be open all 3 days. So go out, network, and learn something. Thank you, everybody.
Ken, how would you like to write a column? You and Dave maybe, find test.